I arrived right on time, 4 p.m. sharp, clutching the pumpkin pie I had baked from scratch the night before, a little too proud of my perfectly golden crust. That pie was more than dessert. It was tradition. It was a piece of me, a small, sweet offering to the people I loved most. I parked in front of my parents' house, the one I grew up in, nestled in the quiet suburbs outside Chicago. The sun was dipping low, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood. The chill in the November air was biting, but my chest felt warm with anticipation. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite. It was the one day that felt safe, sacred, when work stress, deadlines, and the constant race of life paused. It was the day we came home. I remember gripping the pie a little tighter as I stepped out of the car. Something felt off. The driveway was empty. No familiar cluster of cars. No laughter drifting through the windows. No scent of roasted turkey escaping through the cracks of the front door. My family was always here early, helping, bickering, preparing together. My sister Jessica would usually be inside, half helping, half scrolling through her phone. Dad would be sneaking bites of stuffing when Mom wasn't looking. And Mom, God, she'd be orchestrating everything like a symphony, with that stressed but content look on her face. Every year, it was the same. And I loved it. But today, the house was silent. I tried to shake the unease bubbling in my gut. Maybe I was early. Maybe they were just running late. I knocked lightly on the door. No answer. I pressed the doorbell. Silence. I waited. My heart began to race, the pie suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. I knocked harder, loud enough to echo. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I scrolled to my mom's texts from that morning. 4 p.m. is perfect. Her words still there, black and white, clear as day. I started typing, asking where everyone was, but before I could hit send, my screen lit up. A message from Mom, thought you were running late. I blinked. Reread it. Once. Twice. My stomach twisted. I barely had time to process it before another message came in from Jessica. We couldn't wait forever. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. What did that mean? They had started, without me? That couldn't be right. They always waited. We had this unspoken rule: Thanksgiving didn't begin until everyone was there. No matter what. Even when Jessica had shown up late last year because of some shopping thing, we had waited. Even when I had flown in from New York 2 years ago and my flight was delayed, they had kept dinner on hold, smiling through their hunger. That was the whole point, being together. I pushed the door open, my pulse pounding in my ears. It creaked, the sound unfamiliar, like the house itself was hesitant to welcome me. The warmth of the house wrapped around me, but it felt wrong. I stepped inside, half expecting someone to jump out and say, "Surprise!" A joke, maybe? But there was no laughter. No hugs. No dad cracking one of his terrible jokes. Just quiet. And then I saw it. The dining room table, the centerpiece of every Thanksgiving memory, was wrecked. Plates were pushed aside, half-eaten turkey still on the serving platter, stuffing clumped and cold, cranberry sauce smeared like an afterthought. Forks and crumpled napkins lay discarded. The air was thick with the fading scent of gravy and disappointment. It was over. They had eaten. Without me. I froze. The pie slipped a little in my hands. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to explain. To tell me this was some mistake. That I hadn't been forgotten. But the silence screamed louder than any words could. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at what was left of our family dinner, the dinner I had spent all week looking forward to, reduced to dirty plates and cold leftovers. My chest burned with something sharp and unfamiliar. Hurt. Anger. Maybe both. The pie felt ridiculous now, this perfect little thing, baked with love for a table I hadn't even been invited to. I turned around slowly, walked back to the door, and stepped outside. The cold air stung my cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the ache blooming in my chest. I got into my car, placed the pie carefully on the passenger seat like it was the only thing that still mattered, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But all I could do was sit there in stunned silence, my mind racing. Why didn't they wait for me? Why didn't anyone call? Not one of them thought to check if I was okay? Did I mean that little to them? I started the engine, but I didn't drive away. Not yet. I sat there, staring at the house that had once been my safe place. Now it felt like a stranger's home. My breath fogged up the windshield as the questions kept swirling, louder and louder. Had I ever really belonged there? Or had I just been fooling myself all along? Comment 111 if you've ever felt like you didn't matter to the people you love. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, my hands still wrapped tightly around the steering wheel, staring blankly at the house I had once called home. The half-eaten turkey, the crumpled napkins, the remnants of what should have been our family dinner, it was all still burned into my mind. My heart ached with a heaviness I couldn't shake. I thought coming home would be my refuge, my escape from the relentless grind of my life in Chicago. Instead, it felt like I had arrived at a place where I was no longer wanted, like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. As the engine hummed beneath me, my thoughts drifted backward, pulling me into the years leading up to this moment. I had always been the one they could count on, the one who put everyone else's needs before her own. I was the one who drove through a snowstorm to pick up Mom from the airport when her flight got delayed, while Jessica claimed she was too tired to make the drive. I was the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. wrapping Christmas gifts for everyone after Mom called, panicking because she had run out of time. Every birthday card, every last-minute grocery run, every time someone needed a favor, it was me. Always me. When Jessica lost her job 2 years ago, I didn't hesitate. She called me crying, saying she couldn't afford her rent. Without thinking, I wired her $1,200. That month, I skipped my student loan payment just to cover her bills. She promised to pay me back, but she never did. I never brought it up. Because that's what sisters do, right? We help each other. And when Dad had surgery on his back last year, I was in New York on a business trip. I remember standing in my hotel room, staring at my laptop, knowing I had a presentation the next morning that could make or break my promotion. But the thought of Dad in that hospital bed, scared and alone, was louder than any career ambition. I changed my flight. Got back to Chicago at midnight. I slept in a plastic chair by his bedside, holding his hand, while Jessica and Mom texted from home, asking for updates, but never once offering to relieve me. I never said anything. I never complained. Because that's what family is for. Or so I thought. The irony of it all was that they had started to see me as the busy one. The one who always had a meeting or a deadline. The one who'd text, "Can't make it tonight," more often than not. I had become the reliable background character, the safety net they took for granted, but never the person they actually made space for. Jessica was the golden child, the one who was always there, because she never had much going on. She was the one who could spend hours chatting with Mom about recipes or home decor. The one Dad doted on, because she reminded him of his little girl who used to sit on his lap, even though she was pushing 30 now. And me? I was the afterthought. The responsible one. The one who'd figure it out on her own. But I had needed this Thanksgiving more than I had ever needed it before. Work had been suffocating for months. 60-hour weeks, back-to-back calls, endless emails that bled into my weekends. I had been skipping lunch, eating granola bars at my desk, waking up in the middle of the night with my chest tight from stress. I told myself it was temporary, that the promotion was worth it. But deep down, I was running on fumes. Thanksgiving was supposed to be the break. The reminder that there was life outside my office. It was supposed to be the warm cocoon of family, laughter, Dad's terrible dad jokes, Mom's wine-fueled stories, and Jessica sneaking a third slice of pie while we all pretended not to notice. It was the one day I counted on to remind me that no matter how hard life got, I still had them. But this year, they didn't wait. I felt stupid for holding on to that pie like it was some sacred artifact, believing it meant something, like my presence at that table mattered as much as the turkey or the mashed potatoes. But apparently, it didn't. They had moved on without me, and for the first time, I had to ask myself the question I had been avoiding for years: was I just fooling myself into thinking I was important to them? The worst part was, I couldn't even blame them entirely. I had let this pattern build. I had made it easy for them to expect me to show up without ever asking what I needed in return. I was the one who canceled plans with friends because Mom needed someone to help set up for Jessica's baby shower. I was the one who skipped vacations because Dad needed someone to house sit while they visited Aunt Kathy. And I was the one who always smiled and said, "It's fine," when they forgot my birthday 2 years in a row. It wasn't fine. But I made it seem like it was. I gripped the wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I wasn't ready to cry. Not yet. The anger was still too fresh, too raw. I deserved better. Didn't I? I thought about my dad. Mike. The quiet one. He loved me, I knew that. But he had this way of letting Mom and Jessica steer the ship. He would glance my way sometimes, his eyes soft with understanding, but he never said much. And when he did, it was always something safe like, "That's just how your mom is," or "Jessica's going through a lot right now." He never fought for me. And maybe that was what hurt the most. That no one had ever fought for me, not once. I looked at my phone. Another text from Mom: "We're sorry. Please don't be upset." Upset? Upset was what you felt when the grocery store ran out of your favorite cereal. This was something else entirely. This was grief. Grief for the version of my family I had created in my mind. The one where we all mattered equally. The one where I was more than just the responsible one. I knew I had to make a decision. I could go inside, pretend this never happened, scrape together some small talk over cold stuffing, and pretend it didn't gut me to know they hadn't cared enough to wait. Or I could drive away, finally acknowledging the truth I had buried for so long, that maybe I had been giving my all to people who never thought twice about me. I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. As I pulled away from the house, the questions chased me like shadows. Would they even notice I was gone? Would they finally see what they had done? Or would they just carry on, laughing, drinking wine, while I drifted further into the background, out of sight, out of mind? I didn't know. But for the first time, I wondered if I was ready to stop trying to be the person who always showed up. Maybe it was time they noticed what it felt like when I didn't. Comment 222 if you've ever given your all to people who took you for granted. I drove without a destination, the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the radio filling the silence that had wrapped itself around me like a suffocating fog. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, the weight of what had just happened sinking deeper into my chest with every mile I put between myself and that house. My family's house. My home, or at least, the place I had always believed was home. But now, it felt like nothing more than a hollow shell, a stage where I had been cast aside while the rest of them continued their perfect performance. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to keep moving. The streets were quiet, the sky a soft, dusky gray as evening settled over the suburbs. I passed familiar places, the gas station where Dad used to let me pick out candy as a kid, the school Jessica and I had walked to together every morning, the park where Mom would take us to play when we were little. These places had once held warmth, but now they felt distant, like relics from a life that belonged to someone else. Someone who mattered. Eventually, I pulled into a small park I hadn't been to in years. It was nearly empty, the cold keeping most people inside. I parked under a bare tree, its branches skeletal against the dimming sky. I turned off the engine and let the silence settle around me. My breath fogged the windshield as I leaned back, staring at nothing in particular. The pumpkin pie was still on the passenger seat, untouched. I stared at it for a long moment, before finally reaching over, peeling back the foil. The crust had started to sag, the filling slightly cracked. It looked as defeated as I felt. I grabbed a plastic fork from my glove compartment, because of course I had one. I was always prepared, always the responsible one, and scooped a bite. It was cold, the spices dulled, but I ate it anyway. Each bite was an attempt to cling to something, some shred of normalcy, some reminder that I had made this pie with love, with the belief that it would be shared around that table. Instead, it was just me, alone in my car, eating it with plastic cutlery as the world carried on without me. The tears finally came then. Silent at first, sliding hot down my cheeks, catching in the corners of my mouth as I kept eating. But with each swallow, the anger bubbled up alongside the grief. This was my breaking point. Not the empty table, not the text messages, but this pathetic, lonely moment, choking down pie in the dark like I was the one who had done something wrong. I set the fork down, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and exhaled sharply. I wouldn't let them see me like this. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. That night, my phone lit up with the first text from my mom. "We're sorry. You should have told us you were coming." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. That was it? No acknowledgement, no ownership, just a subtle suggestion that it was my fault for not reminding them? Like I was some outsider who needed an invitation to my own family's dinner. I didn't reply. The next morning, another message. This time from Jessica. "Mom's upset. Don't be dramatic." Dramatic. I nearly laughed. Or screamed. I couldn't decide which. Was this how they saw me? As the one who was overreacting, making a scene over nothing, while they got to brush it off and move on? I spent the day in a haze, alternating between anger and disbelief. I replayed every sacrifice, every time I had put them first. I thought about Dad's surgery, Jessica's rent, the late nights wrapping their gifts while they slept peacefully. I thought about every time I had driven home exhausted from work, just to make sure I didn't miss a birthday, a holiday, a Sunday dinner. I thought about how none of it had mattered. Then came the final straw. That evening, scrolling through Facebook like I always did when I needed to distract myself, I saw it. Jessica's post. A photo from the night before, my family, gathered around the table. Dad carving the turkey, Mom holding her wine glass mid-toast, Jessica laughing with her fiancé. Plates full, faces glowing. Everyone was there. Except me. I stared at the screen, my throat tightening, my vision blurring with fresh tears. They looked happy, like I hadn't even been a thought in their minds. Like my absence had made no difference at all. That was when it hit me. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen to move on without me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't miscommunication. It was a decision. I was never part of their perfect picture. I was the afterthought, the one they called when they needed help, but never the one they waited for when it mattered. The rage that filled me was different this time. It wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold. Steady. Clarifying. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in this family. Trying to prove that I was worth their time, their love, their consideration. But I finally saw it for what it was. I was never going to matter the way I deserved to. I put my phone down, my hands trembling, but my mind clearer than it had been in days. I wasn't going to beg for their attention anymore. I wasn't going to keep showing up for people who so easily moved on without me. I was done. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the pie finally pushed aside, untouched after that first desperate attempt at comfort. I thought about what it would mean, to step back, to stop trying, to let them feel my absence. Would they even notice? Would they care? A part of me still hoped they would. That maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That they would finally see me. But another part of me knew better. And maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to let go. Comment 333 if you think it's time I stand up for myself. The night I saw Jessica's Facebook post, I made a decision. Maybe it wasn't loud, maybe it wasn't dramatic, but it was final. I was done being the one who cared more. I was done being the backup plan, the reliable daughter who was always there when everyone else had better things to do. If my absence at that table hadn't mattered to them, then maybe it was time they felt what it was like to not have me to lean on. I blocked their numbers the next morning. Mom, Jessica, even Dad. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a final message explaining how hurt I was. I didn't owe them that. If they cared, if they truly cared, they would know what they had done. They would feel it the way I felt it when I walked into that half-eaten dinner, my pie still warm in my hands, and realized I had been forgotten. At first, it felt like taking back power. I focused on work, throwing myself into the marketing campaign I had been behind on. I stayed late at the office, took on extra responsibilities. My boss noticed. She called me into her office after a particularly grueling week and told me there was a potential promotion on the table, regional manager. It would mean relocating to Austin, Texas. A fresh start. I told her I needed time to think, but as I sat at my desk later that afternoon, I realized I was already picturing it. A city where no one knew me as the busy one or the responsible one. A place where I wasn't the person everyone assumed would pick up the slack. But for all the work, for all the distractions, there was a void I couldn't fill. I'd come home to my apartment, kick off my heels, and stare at my phone on the kitchen counter, silent, except for work emails and notifications from brands I didn't care about. The block was still in place, but I knew they had tried to reach me. I checked my voicemail out of habit one evening, and there it was, Mom's voice. Emily. I don't know what's going on. We didn't mean to hurt you, sweetheart. Please call me. Please. Her voice cracked toward the end. I almost called back. Almost. But then I remembered the cold stuffing, the empty chairs, the laughter in Jessica's photo. I remembered how easy it had been for them to go on without me. So I pressed delete. The guilt came, as I knew it would. I heard her voice in my head while I brushed my teeth, while I microwaved dinner, while I tried to sleep. But for once, I let myself feel the guilt without trying to fix it. I started making quiet changes. Changes they wouldn't see, but I felt in every corner of my life. I opened a separate savings account, one that Mom wouldn't know about, one that wouldn't be tapped into the next time Jessica was short on rent or Dad's truck broke down. I took 2 personal days off work, not because someone needed me, but because I needed me. I went to a coffee shop with a book I had been meaning to read for months. I sat by the window and watched people pass by. I breathed. I stopped answering out-of-the-blue calls from distant relatives, the ones who only called when they needed help booking flights or wanted advice on their resumes. I wasn't their personal assistant. Not anymore. And for the first time, I let myself imagine a future without my family being at the center of it. I imagined waking up in Austin, walking to a new office, grabbing coffee with colleagues who knew me only as Emily, the sharp, ambitious woman who had earned her place, not as someone's daughter or sister. I thought about holidays spent differently, maybe traveling with friends or volunteering somewhere that appreciated me. Maybe starting my own traditions, ones that didn't leave me questioning my worth. But as much as I tried to build this future in my mind, the past still clung to me. 3 days after blocking their numbers, an email popped up in my inbox. It was from Mom. Subject line, please, can we talk? Her message was short. We need to talk. I know you're upset. Please, Emily. Can we meet? There was no long-winded apology. No acknowledgement of what had been done. Just a request. I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Part of me wanted to hit delete. Another part of me, the part that still remembered my dad's soft chuckle or the way Mom used to stroke my hair when I was sick, felt something else. Hope. I hated that it was still there, but it was. I replied with a simple, okay. When and where? She suggested a small cafe we used to go to when I was younger, the one with the oversized muffins, and the barista who always remembered my name. It felt calculated, like she was trying to pull up my nostalgia, trying to remind me of the good times so I'd forget what had happened. But this time I was prepared. I wasn't walking into this meeting hoping for their approval or desperate for their love. I was walking in with boundaries, ones they didn't get to cross anymore. I would listen. I would hear her out. But I wouldn't let her guilt me. I wouldn't let her tears wash away what I knew to be true. I had built this life on my own. I had survived every setback, every disappointment, every moment they had overlooked me. I had carried them when they needed me, but they had never carried me. And I could survive without them. As I closed my laptop that night, I realized something. This wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was about every single time I had twisted myself into knots, trying to be what they needed. Every time I had set myself on fire to keep them warm. That was over now. I would go to that cafe. I would hear her out. But this time I would be the one deciding what I was willing to give. Because I finally understood that my value didn't depend on their approval. It never had. Comment 444 if you've ever had to quietly protect your peace. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. I didn't want to. I wanted to be the one who showed up late for once, the one who kept them waiting, made them feel like an afterthought. But that wasn't me. No matter how much I wanted to play the part of someone who didn't care, my body still moved on autopilot, the same way it had every time I dropped everything for them. The small bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside. The place hadn't changed. The same rustic wooden tables, the chalkboard menu with messy handwriting, the faint smell of brewed coffee mixed with fresh muffins. I remembered coming here with Mom when I was a teenager, back when our relationship was simpler. Back when she looked at me like I was someone she wanted to spend time with, not just someone she expected to show up. I chose a table near the window. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. I wouldn't let them see me nervous. Not this time. A few minutes later, the door chimed again. I didn't need to look up to know it was her. I felt her presence the way you feel a storm before it hits. "Hi, sweetheart," Mom said softly. Her voice was gentle, but there was tension beneath it, like she was walking on eggshells. She slid into the seat across from me, setting her purse down carefully, as though any sudden movement would cause me to shatter. I nodded. No smile. Just polite. Guarded. We sat in silence for a moment. I watched her fidget with the napkin, folding and unfolding it like it was some puzzle she couldn't solve. Her face was thinner than I remembered. Her eyes, once so sharp, looked tired. For a brief second, I felt that old pull, the urge to comfort her, to fix whatever was wrong. But I swallowed it down. Jessica arrived next. She breezed in, all confidence and casual indifference, like this was a quick coffee break between yoga and brunch. She glanced at me, offered a tight-lipped smile, and sat down next to Mom. Her coat was designer. Her nails perfectly manicured. She looked every bit the part of the golden child, the one who had never had to fight to be seen. "Well," Jessica said, crossing her legs. "This is something." I bit my tongue. "Not yet." Mom cleared her throat. "I'm glad you came, Emily. I know things have been hard. We didn't mean for you to feel left out." Left out. Like I had missed a group text about drinks after work, not the family dinner that was supposed to be my safe place. "You didn't mean for me to feel left out," I repeated slowly, my voice sharper than I intended. "But you did it anyway." Mom flinched. Jessica sighed, leaning back in her chair. "We thought you were busy," Jessica said with a shrug. "It was just dinner." Just dinner. Those two words snapped something inside me. I felt the heat rise to my face, my chest tightening. Every sacrifice, every overlooked birthday, every late-night hospital vigil, every time I had shown up when no one else did, rushed through me like a tidal wave. "It's not about the damn turkey," I said, louder than I meant to. Heads turned. I didn't care. "It's about being treated like I don't matter. Like I'm invisible. Like I'm not part of this family unless it's convenient for you." Mom's eyes filled with tears. Her hand trembled as she reached across the table, but I didn't take it. "Honey, we didn't." "No," I cut her off. "Don't say you didn't mean it. You chose it. You chose to eat without me. You chose to post pictures smiling and laughing like everything was perfect. You didn't forget me. You decided I wasn't important enough to wait for." Jessica's posture stiffened. She leaned forward, her voice defensive. "Emily, you're blowing this out of proportion. You've always been dramatic. We were hungry. We thought you'd show up late like you always do. It wasn't personal." I laughed bitterly. "Not personal? It's always personal when you're the one being left out." The words hung between us like a wall. Mom dabbed at her eyes with the napkin she had twisted into knots. Jessica crossed her arms, staring out the window like she wanted to be anywhere but here. For the first time, I saw it all clearly. They didn't get it. They never had. And they probably never would. I felt my heart slow. The anger didn't burn quite as hot anymore. It was replaced by something colder, acceptance. "I'm done," I said quietly, but firmly. "I'm done being the one who cares more. The one who bends over backward to make sure everyone else is okay while no one asks if I'm okay." Mom's lip quivered. "Emily, please, we love you." I nodded. "I know. But love isn't enough. Not if it comes with conditions. Not if it only matters when it's easy for you." Jessica shifted in her seat. "So what? You're cutting us off because we ate dinner without you? That's ridiculous." I met her gaze, steady. "I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not chasing you anymore. If you want me in your life, you're going to have to prove you deserve me there. Because I deserve better than this." The power shifted then. I saw it in their faces. Shock. Hurt. Maybe even a little fear. But I didn't feel guilty. Not this time. I stood up, sliding my chair back, slowly. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. "I hope you mean it when you say you love me," I said, looking at both of them. "Because love requires effort. And if you can't make that effort, I'm okay with walking away." I picked up my coat, slung it over my shoulder, and turned toward the door. Mom called my name softly, but I didn't look back. I stepped outside into the crisp air. It bit at my cheeks, but I welcomed it. I stood there for a moment, breathing in deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't sure what would happen next. Maybe they'd change. Maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time, I realized it didn't matter. Because I had finally chosen myself. Comment 555 if you think I did the right thing. The 2 weeks that followed the cafe confrontation were the quietest my phone had been in years. No check-ins from Mom asking if I could pick up something from the store. No texts from Jessica complaining about her boyfriend or asking for money. No forwarded emails from Dad that were more chain letters than actual conversations. Just silence. At first, it was a relief. After years of feeling like I was tethered to them, always ready to drop everything when they called, the stillness felt like freedom. I woke up without dreading what obligation might come next. My days were mine again. But after a few days, the quiet turned into something heavier. I'd find myself picking up my phone absent-mindedly, scrolling through my contacts, my thumb hovering over Mom. I'd check my messages instinctively, expecting to see one from Jessica telling me I was being dramatic, or worse, nothing at all. But there was nothing. They had finally given me the space I had demanded, and now, I was left to sit with it. I thought about the pie. That stupid pie I had made with so much love, imagining how it would sit at the center of our table, surrounded by laughter and warmth. I thought about the empty table I had found instead, the cold leftovers, the echoes of conversations I hadn't been a part of. The anger was still there. But so was the ache. I missed the idea of him. The family I had built up in my mind, the one I had convinced myself existed if I just worked hard enough to hold it all together. But now, for the first time, I wasn't trying to fix it. I was letting the cracks show. I was letting it fall apart. One afternoon, my phone lit up with a voicemail from Mom. Her voice was shaky, but not desperate. Just honest. "We know we hurt you. We want to do better. Please, call me when you're ready." I listened to it twice. The first time, my chest tightened with that familiar urge to make it right, to be the good daughter who forgives and forgets. But the second time, I heard something different. I heard the part where she said, "when you're ready." For the first time, she was giving me control. She was waiting on me. But I wasn't ready. Instead, I focused on something that had been sitting in the back of my mind since that day at the office. The promotion. The fresh start. I called my boss the next morning. "I'm in," I said before she could even finish her greeting. "I'll take the position. I'll move to Austin." The words felt like a door swinging open. A week later, I was signing papers for my first apartment, my name, and only my name, on the lease. No safety net from Mom and Dad. No spare key for Jessica. Just mine. The apartment was small, with a view of the parking lot, but it was mine. Moving day was a blur of cardboard boxes and takeout pizza. I set up my couch and my bed, but I left the dining table for last. I stared at it for a long time before placing the centerpiece, a new ceramic bowl filled with lemons. Bright. Fresh. Full of possibility. Christmas came, and for the first time, I didn't spend it at my parents' house. I spent it with friends, people who had shown up for me when my own family hadn't. We drank wine in mismatched glasses, ate too much pasta because no one wanted to roast a turkey, and laughed until we cried. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I belonged. That night, I sat by my window, looking out over the lights of the city. I thought about my family, their Christmas, their familiar patterns. Maybe Mom was pouring wine, maybe Jessica was complaining about something trivial, maybe Dad was telling the same joke he always did. I still loved them. I probably always would. But now, I loved myself more. I had spent my whole life showing up for them, hoping that if I just did everything right, they would finally see me. But now, I realized something: they might never see me the way I wanted them to. And that was okay. Because I saw myself. Family wasn't just blood. Family was who showed up for you. And I was finally showing up for myself. So, what would you do? Have you ever had to choose yourself over the people you thought would always be there? Have you ever realized that the only person you really needed to save was you? Comment 666 if you believe putting yourself first is the best kind of victory. Looking back on everything, I realize now that the hardest part wasn't the silence. It wasn't even the betrayal of that Thanksgiving dinner. It was accepting that sometimes the people we expect to love us the most can be the ones who hurt us the deepest. And when that happens, when the people you call family make you feel small, invisible, or like you're only valuable when you're useful, you're left with a choice. You can keep shrinking yourself to fit into their world, hoping that one day they'll finally see you, finally treat you the way you deserve. Or, you can choose yourself. That's what I did. And it was the hardest, most painful decision I've ever made. But it was also the best one. Choosing myself didn't mean I stopped loving my family. It didn't mean I wanted them to suffer. It meant I refused to suffer for their comfort. It meant I set boundaries to protect my peace. It meant I finally said, I deserve better. And maybe you've been there, too. Maybe you've sat in your car, feeling that same emptiness I felt. Maybe you've given everything to people who never even noticed. Maybe you've stayed silent, because you were afraid that if you spoke up, you'd lose them altogether. I understand. I've been there. But I want you to know, you deserve to be valued. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not just for what you can do for others. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to teach people how to treat you. And sometimes, it's the only way to remind yourself that you matter. So, I'm asking you, have you ever had to choose yourself over family? Have you ever had to step back from people you loved just to find your peace? If you have, I want to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you were the one who cared more, please, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Revenge Real Tales. This is a place for people like us. People who've been overlooked, dismissed, or hurt, but who found the strength to rise above it. I'll be here, waiting with the truth. Because sometimes, the best revenge is finally choosing yourself.